Okay, everybody.
And
Welcome.
to live stream the meeting.
All right. Go ahead, Queen Tahira.
Hold on.
What do you want me to do?
Okay, yeah, we're good. We're live.
Moderate the conversation.
Okay. Okay, well, how's everybody doing so far?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. For those that don't know me, or this may be your first time meeting me, my name's Tahira, and I've known Brother Bennu for a century at least. And I'm honored to be here to serve. Brother Bennu, is there an agenda?
Yeah, we're gonna be talking about the George Floyd, his murder, the verdict that was rendered, the movement for racial justice around the country, and how that intersects and interconnects with what we're doing with the national freedom movement, the human rights movement, for people who are incarcerated. And so we're just gonna have an open conversation here on Facebook Live today. And we hope that people will join the conversation. If you have questions or comments, get involved with the National Freedom Movement. And we're looking at, there's a couple of situations I think that were interesting in the context of the George Floyd murder, the George Floyd trial, and issues that are going on right now today that I think we have to highlight so that people can understand why all of this stuff is connected. George Floyd was accused of attempting to pass a counterfeit bill, which is a crime. Police were there, the slave catchers were there to arrest him. As we've gotten to the murder trial of the officer who killed George Floyd, in the process of the jury rendering the verdict, we know that another person, black person, was killed, 16-year-old child. The very next morning, there was a black man in North Carolina. He was shot 10 times in the back. We haven't received the video yet. But in all of those instances, the police were there to make an arrest. They were there to arrest a young man who was murdered in North Carolina, shot 10 times. He had 10 children. And they were there to arrest him on a drug charge. They were there on a domestic. And so we're trying to—
Cut out, Brother Bennu.
Okay, so we're trying to make sure that we draw this connection for people to see and understand that, like, all of this stuff is interconnected and related. And so what we're doing is working to try to bring all of these elements together for what they're calling racial justice or abolition work or whatever you want to call it. Like, there's a real problem with policing, murder, the over incarceration, or whatever you want to, whatever label you use. Like, these issues all relate to one another. So that's what the conversation is about today. So I'm gonna turn the floor over to Lulu. You want to chime in on that, Lulu? I think some of this stuff is going on right up there in your backyard.
On mute.
Yeah, definitely. I have something to say about it. I think that what people don't understand is when they don't kill us, when they're pulling us over, they are falsely incarcerating us. If you look at the situation where the Army sergeant was pulled over, the man, the officer basically threatened him, and basically after he realized the level of error that he had made, he basically threatened him and told him, I've talked to my superior, you can either let this go or, this is basically going to be your record. And the reason why that happened is because in most cases, most Black people cannot afford to fight them. It's their word against ours. And so in the event that that particular sergeant wouldn't have been able to fight it, that would have been an ongoing battle. And so what people have to understand is that it doesn't just start with policing. I mean, it doesn't start and end with policing. It also, it's a worldwide issue, whether it's dealing with the economy or dealing with incarceration. my biggest problem is that, there was also another video going around where the police picked boys up because they didn't have licenses to ride their bikes. And so my point is that, we really have to be meticulous when we see people getting pulled over. It's almost like, and I've seen it here in Raleigh, when we see young people getting pulled over, people pull over with them. And it's unfortunate, and it's really unfortunate that, in my own personal opinion, that majority of the time, the people I'm debating are not other white people. The people that I am debating are Black men. And so I struggle as a Black woman who is always out here on the front line fighting for Black men because I love and believe in them. And then in the same token, every single time there's a social justice issue, Black men are the ones. And I'm not saying you or Muad, what I'm saying? Like, the people on this call obviously are not of the issue, but it's constantly the issue. And that has to do with the generational breakdown. But I just, my level of frustration is so high. Maybe let me just pass this to somebody else until I can get some more words out. But it's a struggle for me. I really had to kind of disconnect because I've been ready to say, even for me, if you come to my house with the intentions to fight me, I'm gonna do something to you too. What in the world? So I just gotta make sure that I have, sound reasoning behind some of the things that I say. But, people say, I've heard so many people say so many things, and I know I'm all over the place. But the key factor is, well, what did you want the police to do when they shot the little girl? Well, I wanted them to say, I wanted them to do just what they do when all the rest of these white kids be fighting. I've never pulled up to a bar fight or been in a bar fight where white people are crashing bottles upside people's heads and seen the police just automatically start shooting. I've worked as a school operations administrator for the past almost 4 or 5 years, and there are kids in there cutting, stabbing, doing all kinds of things. I've never seen a teacher just openly shoot somebody 4 times in the chest. And so where my frustration comes in is that there isn't any outrage because the violence coming conditional. The violence outside, violence inside of prisons, people just automatically assume people who are incarcerated should be treated that way. Well, heck, I was writing some bad checks and that's why I'm in prison. You know what I mean? Not to say that other people shouldn't be treated, with other crimes shouldn't be treated well, but the assumption that we make, and just to watch the comments coming from Black people is the sickness that my mind. So Savannah, somebody help me because I can't do 1 more minute of this right now. Like right now, I'm so infuriated by this. And people don't think, this is trauma. And every single time a new situation happens, we are re-traumatized.
Yeah, this is Queen. I want to chime in real quick. You're absolutely fine. Can you hear me? This is Tahira.
Yes.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with your mindset that we definitely need to take this more seriously, not only as individuals, not only as organizations, but as a community as a whole. One of the things that we have always known is that those who are unaware of their history are bound to repeat it. And there's a reason why this keeps repeating itself. And it's, in my opinion, mainly because of gatekeepers that look like us, that are so comfortable within the system, within the capitalist system, that they don't want to rock the boat to make those who they consider cronies uncomfortable. And so unless you're willing to make people uncomfortable with the normality of the abuse that we have suffered for generations, this didn't just start. And if you look at, like I said, the history of how the police were started in the beginning, they're doing exactly what they were hired and trained to do. And it's to protect and serve property. It's not to protect and serve people. And the sooner we can get that across to our children, the sooner we can get that across to the community and start operating from that mind state that just because you're here to protect property does not mean that you get to infringe and disregard my human rights and unalienable rights and the treaties that are in place to protect us, whether we're incarcerated or whether we're supposedly free out here in society. We're going to have to make some people uncomfortable. And with that, I yield.
Yeah, I want to Ramadan Mubarak for anybody who's fasting right now, but just to talking about the situation with I want to talk about the George Floyd verdict, and then several other things that have happened since then. A lot of people were really happy with the outcome, and I was asked afterwards. I actually had a meeting right after it. They announced it, and I said, I don't feel happy. I said, I'm not happy. I said, because the first thing I thought about was how many Black men and Black people as a whole are going to be killed by police from now until till Chauvin, Derek Chauvin is actually sentenced. And and I think the day later, even though it happened a lot quicker, that's when I heard about Ma'Khia Bryant. And when you think about Daunte Wright, I mean, it's thinking about a victory, like whatever I guess consolation it gave the family, I can understand that, but thinking of it as a victory as a whole, because one crooked cop, murderous cop, was given charged guilty on three counts of manslaughter and so on and so forth. This is really not a victory when you think about the whole system. Because if you think about, like I said on another program, you think about Daunte Wright, this is all a continuation of really the anti-Blackness and slave laws from the beginning. Because when you think about Daunte Wright, he was pulled over because of an air freshener was illegal. And the first thing I thought about was pig laws and Black codes. You criminalize any old thing almost as an excuse, well, not almost, specifically as an excuse to arrest somebody, to make them a slave, to make them the convict, lease the convicts out, put them back in slavery. The same way, right after Reconstruction, people who are unemployed or people, vagrancy laws or looking at somebody wrong, you get arrested and then they can put you and lease you out to other people, put you right back in slavery, peonage or convict leasing, and so on and so forth. And so I just thought about the same way, like someone has said before, the creation of the police were actually plantation. Like I actually saw a sheriff star. I said, I believe it said Mississippi Plantation Police. And before I had actually seen, just slave catchers with the same type of, star symbol. But, police were originally slave catchers, catch runaway slaves. And so a lot of times now what I see is you have the slave catchers going to catch runaway slaves or potential slaves. And when they run away, they kill them. That's another thing I thought about, the Casual Killing Act. You can kill somebody, you can kill a slave if they resist. And so all this stuff, like Tahir was saying, all this stuff is just is history, just kind of keeps showing itself over and over. And so if we don't, address the systemic issues of anti-Blackness, then you were always going to see these certain things as wins and not attack the bigger problem. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, true that. And like they understood that narrative in this process. Like you could see the mainstream media, and you can see the cronies and the lackeys and the bootlicks coming around, jumping onto this verdict, hollering, justice. We got justice. It's accountability. But we didn't get justice. There's no way to get justice in a situation like this when a man has been murdered. And the accountability was not achieved because Derek Chauvin's defense and all these officers have reminded us over and over and over that this is part of their training. Like the accountability cannot even possibly occur until the structural issues, the systemic issues that made this possible, put all this into place, is adjudicated. And the jury returned a verdict that what they are doing is wrong. That's the only thing I saw in the jury verdict. The jury verdict adjudicated the question of, is policing and the way that they're trained and the way that it's being done systemically, is it wrong? Have they violated our human rights? That was the only adjudication I saw. But that even has not been resolved because of what we saw with the murders that occurred immediately following it. I mean, literally in the process of the jury coming from the jury room to the courtroom and delivering the verdict, Makia was murdered. And then the following morning, before we even had, we first had to press pause on our emotions because of what happened to her. And then before we were able to wake up in the morning and say, wow, okay, this actually happened, before we could even do that, we learned about the murder. I think his name is Anthony Brown. I may be wrong on that, but we learned about him being executed in North Carolina. So we never even had even for people who wanted to receive it as a victim, you never even got a chance to celebrate. And the final thing I want to say before we allow someone else to come and speak is that this is what I want people to remember. Like, these police officers that are committing these crimes and doing the cover up, like, what do y'all think they're doing in these capital murder cases when it comes to turning over evidence or withholding evidence? When they get on the witness stand, these are the same people that were the defendant that's sitting over there. They would murder that same defendant with a gun. So what do you think they'll do when it comes to getting on the witness stand, trying to decide, okay, am I going to tell the truth, which is going to free this person, or am I going to lie and say he had the drugs on him, or I saw him throw the drug, or it was in plain sight, or I smelled marijuana, that's what gave me probable cause, or on and on and on and on and on and on down the spectrum. These are the players and the people that are part of the prosecution. And remember, they're trained in that area too. The forensic science experts, these people are trained. We saw the expert in George Floyd's case. Now, all of a sudden, we're learning numerous police involved murders are being reopened and investigated because of this guy's testimony. So what does that say about the people that didn't die, that are on death row, or that suffer some other kind of fate at the hands of the criminal justice system? All of this stuff is related and connected, and that's why we have to make sure that we don't allow this issue to be co-opted and to be narrowed and to make people think that it's only at this point right here when someone's murdered by police that this issue exists, because it supersedes that and it goes into the whole system when it comes to the criminal justice system or whatever we're using to describe. I yield.
I think one of the things I wanted to bring up also is that I've heard a lot of conversation about, well, police don't only kill Black people, but one common denominator that I find in these officer-involved shootings with people of color is that it seems like the victims are the ones that are on trial. So, you have the George Floyd trial, the Botham Jean trial. It's like, it's all about, the people who got killed and what they did to possibly precipitate dying, right? George Floyd had a counterfeit bill. Botham Jean, he was in his own home and they still managed to find a way to make it look like he not necessarily deserved, but just assassinating these people's character, I can't, what was the little girl's name? Ma'Khia Bryant, she had the knife, but, again, police are there to protect and serve. But from the video I saw, the cop literally got out and started shooting. I don't even know how he could have assessed. I don't even know how he could have assessed the situation, I watched the video, there was somebody kicking somebody on one end, it was chaotic, I'll give it that, but, for them to get out of the car and just start shooting somebody, I don't understand that. It just seems like all rules, processes, policies, and procedures are out the window when it comes to dealing with people of color. And that's my biggest issue with this. And, I want to echo what Lily said, because, I've heard this from a lot of Black women in the past couple of days since the killing of Ma'Khia Bryant. Like, it seems like our brothers are rationalizing this, right? And me as a mother, I'm looking at it like, that could have been my daughter, as I do when I see a young man, like that could have been my son. But, just to hear someone like, when as a mother, like you're crying out, like my heart hurt. That was, a 16-year-old girl, right? And to hear a man say, well, if she didn't have a knife, if she wasn't so ghetto, like I've heard all these things, in the past couple of days. And it's like, well, maybe if somebody would have helped try to address those situations in the beginning, we wouldn't be here. But at the end of the day, she's not the one that's on trial, and she can't speak for herself, right? So we don't know the specifics of the situation. But it's just like, it's so disgusting to me to hear I'm not like any race of people trying to justify someone getting killed when like there's absolutely no way that they could fully assess the situation. And the last thing I want to point out, like going back and resetting the room to the George Floyd trial and stuff, they recently defaced one of his murals here in Houston and sprayed a racial epithet on it.
I saw that.
Yeah, I heard the police chief come on and say, oh, well, this, and the new police chief is African-American. And he made a statement and he's like, oh, this is probably some kids, or whatever. I don't think it's a hate thing. And you can't say that, right? You don't know, because it's hate language. But I think the focus should be like finding who did this. But again, like the issue is like, this is people's hearts, right? It's not something that they think, and this is how folks live, right? Racism is systemic. It's not something that, you're going to change someone's mind with a verdict. You're not going to change someone's mind with a conviction, right? I mean, Amber Guyger got 10 years. She's going to be out in 5 for going to somebody's house and killing them. So, I mean, I wasn't satisfied with the Chauvin verdict. I'm probably not going to be satisfied with the sentence. And that's hard for me to say because I believe in fair sentencing, but I believe in fair sentencing for everyone, regardless of race or whatever. So that's where I'm at.
Can I just say one more thing? And I'm not going to keep saying one more thing. 2 things. I think that if we start arresting enough dirty police officers, then we might get some fair sentencing laws to actually be passed, because we're going to want they're going to want to be able to justify the release or the early release of those who become incarcerated. But even with, the nastiness and the things like Savannah said, the things that people were saying, you are judging off of something you have very little knowledge of. And I'm talking about, I've seen gay people who have been bashed for being gay making these types of comments. I've seen, women who have experienced, assault and harassment making these types of comments. And my problem, people who claim to be religious and believers and all of these things, and you're making these types of comments, and it's just like, it's overwhelming, because at the end of the day, there is 0 times. I've seen multiple videos since the other day where, young boys stab the police or have knives and are not shot in the chest 4 times. There is no way on God's green earth that people are trained to shoot execution style like that. What happened to the leg? What about the arm? You know what I mean? Like, why is this our first thing? And so I'm not going to break it all down, but I did post the article with Roland Martin, and he stops the video and plays it and he shows you where the other police that were there were appalled that the guy just got out of the car and started shooting. What, as Black people, I just feel like we are becoming accustomed to the trauma. It's happening so much that we shouldn't expect the outrage. We shouldn't expect, or we should know better. We should do better. But on the flip side, it's not like that for everyone. And so this is just so hard for me to even sit here and have a conversation because I've been angry as hell all week. You know, deleting from my Facebook page, unfollowing stuff. I can't believe that you even talk like this. You know, I've really been going through my own personal trauma for the lives of these people that have been lost. And I'm a strong person. So what about all the other people who are not as strong as me, who continue to see this type of trauma and abuse taking place in the Black community? It's crazy.
Yeah, I think our whole community has PTSD from stuff like, it's like perpetual. I mean, it's perpetual. And you know, I don't know if it's propaganda or it's internalized hate, but I'm always shocked and enraged when I see other Black folks, men or women, make excuses for police when they kill Black folks, like, or where he shouldn't have, like you said, like it's the victim's fault, because we see too many times where armed, violent people, when they see that, when the police get to the scene, and it's very clearly seen that the officer's safety is or their life is threatened or their safety is threatened, and they magically always find a way to wrestle them down and get them in cuffs and get them in custody without being killed. I mean, we see it happen too many times, and so there's no coincidence that when it's us, you know, whether it's a Black man or a Black woman or a Black child, I mean, they're killed. Like, it's like they're executed. It's insane.
Yeah. And I want people to look at incarceration like another form of execution that they use. Like, when they ain't just killing you with the gun, they killing you with the life sentence, or they killing you with the 40 years, or they killing you with the death penalty. Like, the manner of death, the manner of execution that they have, like, we can't just get caught up in just one form. Like, you know, human life is being lost all around. You know what I'm saying? And it ain't just from the bullet, it's from everything that they got going on. They have like a extermination system. And then it can start from right here. You can die right here, or you can die right here, or you can die right here, or you can die right here. And it's a system that it all, and all of them work together within that system, whether it's, like I said, the forensic people, the judges, the prosecutors, like, all of them have a way of killing. And someone mentioned earlier, like, intervention, like this situation with this young black child. Like, I want people to understand, like, listen, we're oriented towards murder. Like, that's the reason why we're trying to justify the police murdering the girl, because we've been oriented to think that in this situation, it's okay to kill. But like, what happens when we start become oriented towards intervention or mediation, or, you know what I'm saying, conflict resolution? Like, what happens when we start as a people, like, even for us, when they talk about Black on Black crime, what happens when we orientate ourselves to give me just someone else, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say something real quick. You know, like, I'm glad Banu said that. You know, as far as prisons, right, which is just slavery. Every time I say prison, I'm gonna say slavery, because that's what it is with the 13th Amendment slavery clause. And so, if we're not being instantly executed and killed by police on the outside, then people who are serving long sentences or life sentences are slowly dying in dungeons and cages. And then another thing is, you know, another thing that how we are killed slowly, you know, we have environmental terrorism, you know, because a lot of the poor Black neighborhoods and communities are like built on top of like waste dumps and near factories that pollute pollute the air. So we've got environmental terrorism, redlining. The history of redlining has had a economic genocide on us, which is continuing because wealth is generational, and so if you block people from generations back, people who inherit, who get generational wealth and in life transfers, we get generational poverty because of being blocked and predatory capital targeting us. And so there's so many ways where we are killed because of this anti-Blackness in the system. And so I think that, like Banu said, we can't just look at one thing. It's the whole structural racism and structural anti-Blackness that kills us in so many different ways. I just wanted to bring that up. Oh, and racial tensions. Once we have come up economically and gained wealth, then we're mobbed, racial mobs, white terrorists have plundered and massacred whole towns and neighborhoods. So you catch it from every which way.
Yeah, and then they want to know why we want to burn stuff down. Come on.
Yeah. I wanted to just finish up what I was saying is that like people like when a person is murdered in the streets by the police, it's the prosecutors and the police who make the final decision on who's going to be charged and what they're going to be charged for. When there's what we call horizontal violence or what they label black on black crime or white on white crime or anything, whatever, it's the police and the prosecutors who determine who is going to be charged. When it comes time to prosecuting a capital case or something, it's the prosecutors and it's the police that are going to make the case for the state. Like these people are the agents of death in this country on every level of this stuff, like from the street to the courtroom to the execution chamber. The prosecutors and the police are involved at every step along the way. Oliver is up next, and if anybody else want to follow in, it's an open platform. National Freedom Movement. We're talking about George Floyd, his murder, the verdict, the racial justice movement, and the human rights movement for people in prison. And we're making our case and showing evidence that all of this stuff is interconnected. It's all part of the system, and these are systemic issues that have to be addressed. Go ahead, brother Oliver.
Yeah, thank you, Banu. And like, thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for saying all the things they've said so far. Very true, very powerful. No one deserves to die like George Floyd did. And we need to remember that he was a person with a lot of life left in him. And the verdict that came down, if that provides some small sense of relief to his family, that's okay. Like, we got to acknowledge that. But at the same time, no matter what politicians say, this is not accountability or justice in the greater sense. As Banu already talked about, accountability, would be abolition of police, abolition of prisoners, of prisons, and letting people out. And justice would be reparations. It would be land back. It would be, again, like making sure that Black and Indigenous people and other marginalized communities have what they need, access to resources to live a meaningful life. And I just want to point out, in case anybody missed it, Derek Purnell wrote an amazing piece, came out in The Guardian on Wednesday after the verdict came down. She pointed out something that I think is worth thinking about here, which is that sometimes slave catchers and slave patrols would be punished for their exceptionally brutal behavior. And if slave catchers used to be prosecuted, they have direct line to the police. We've been punishing cops for doing the wrong thing. It's not actually the wrong thing, it's what they're trained to do, since the beginning. And if punishing them was going to solve the problem, it would have already worked. So more punishment for cops ain't the answer. The only answer is abolition. The only way is through. And I want to point out that even though this trial and this verdict is not justice or accountability in a systemic way, the reason that that happened was because of organizing, because of protesting. And we've seen that what little we do get from the system is because we demand it, and we have to keep demanding it. And if we want a world without police and prisons, we've got to make it so that's the only choice they have. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to chime in real quick as it relates to how the police are also protected by the police unions. The police unions, in turn, also finance campaigns. They provide donations to various groups that support them. And that is also a part of the problem that needs to be looked at. You know, how are these police unions able to continue to push qualified immunity forward when it's obvious, it's in everybody's face that human rights have been violated with these assaults? So that's one thing that I'd like to see us look at more. Also, the fact that because of that qualified immunity, it allows the police to be, you know, prosecutor, jury, judge, and executioner in a lot of cases, as we've seen, you know, in the cases that we just talked about. And that's beyond something that we should even have to tolerate in 2021. But look how long we have tolerated it, to the point where, you know, as someone said earlier, we've become comfortable in our own discomfort. The last thing I wanted to say is that if it is unnatural to cage an animal for years, even when you look at zoos that get paid to cage animals, and people come to see caged animals, if eventually even those caged animals are free, how is it humane to cage a human being for as long as we've seen the so-called judicial system cage our brothers and sisters? And I think that's it. That's all I wanted to contribute to the conversation. I yield.
Thank you. It's been a great conversation so far. We still have a few more minutes left. Any other comments? Anyone else want to come on in? Go ahead.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, this Elon, but I'll chime in and say that I like how everybody is, you know, showing how the systems of oppression works, you know, and how it intersects and stuff, you know, as was pointed out with the 13th Amendment and the loophole that it provided so that enslavers can continue to practice slavery. They can continue with the terror and systematic of oppression of and suppression of the human rights and freedom of the people through the criminal justice system. And so, you know, at once upon a time, like the antebellum slavery was done through individuals, you know, it was we was dealing with individual slavery, but the 13th Amendment made it so that the states, the government can actually practice slavery now. So here we are today, you know, we have, and like one of the brothers said earlier, some people call it prisons, he want to call it slavery, because that's what it is, slavery. It's like they come up with these words to try to disguise the harsh reality of things that exist in the world, you know, because when people hear slavery, the first thing come to mind, you know, is the white man on gun. I mean, on horseback with a gun and forcing people to do things against their will. So they always try to find ways to where they could use like I heard somebody use the phrase dog whistle politics to try to take out just to try to like have people to see things sort of kind of differently, sort of like in a way that works in their favor, so you hear words like prison and inmate or, stuff like that, and employer, boss, but it's all the same stuff, it's the same system of oppression. It's just, modernized and upgraded, and so, and I think education too plays a big part because and the suppression of the human rights and freedom of the people, that's being used to execute us too, because we're not, if you think about it, we people of African descent, we're not taught that before we were grown into this country, or other countries during the time of the transatlantic slave trade, we not being told that before that we came from civilized institutions, and so you do a big injustice to people when you don't, when the curriculum we designing from pre-K up to college and university level do not tell these people, who they are, where they come from, what they were doing before the advent of the transatlantic slave trade, and so that's a big part of the problem too, because I think that, the more people, have knowledge of themselves, then it's like, they have something they can look on and be proud of, and what that does is it helps create unity amongst the people. It helps, create pride and self, love, for your people, and so that there helps too to help us to be able to resist the stuff that's happening to us. But one of the main things. Well, let me say this, but we're gonna talk more after the. Is this gonna be a whole nother hour or what? How long are we going to be on this call?
We're going to have a follow-up after this call. We're going to end it probably in about 5 minutes because we started late, but then we're going to have about a 10 to 15 minute follow-up after this.
All right, well, because it's just one more thing I just wanted to say, and that was, I think that as in terms of the solution, because this stuff is steady happening every day. We being executed on all these different fronts, on all these levels. They finding ways to snuff the life, out of people. So since we showing how, the interconnectedness between the George Floyd movement, the workers, that's fighting to get out of poverty, they want decent wages, students want decent, a safe environment to learn and higher education. And so I think that if we could organize, if we could just get together and bring all these complaints together and just, state a human rights, because these are violations of our human rights. We need to put all these issues together and submit them to the UN. We need to share them, around the world, and let people see what's happening to them. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. Did anybody else want to chime in? Got a few more minutes left. We'll get as many perspectives. I appreciate the layer of perspectives that we've gotten on this call and the different contributions that people have made to the conversation, especially when Oliver brought out the point about the reparations. We can't overlook that. And then Ilama just came and wrapped it all up. We're describing all of these different things, but at the core, we simply describing the practice of slavery. Like if you go back and look at the history of slavery, you look at the fugitive slave laws, you look at the Casual Killing Act, you look at what transpired in this country in order to force our people into this institution. Like that's what we just described. It's everything that we just described with
You get a
a
pack of
modern,
yellow spirits?
yeah, with just a little modern touch and a few different words. But at the core, at the heart of all of this, we're describing the 21st century version of an institution that if you look close enough, you'll see that it's identical to what had transpired throughout history. I mean, like there's very little difference. And even when I forgot who it was that made the point that the slave catchers sometimes were even held to trial. Like every now and then a police officer is gonna go and be made a sacrificial lamb. And every time that you see that sacrificial offering, you're gonna see the co-conspirators, those who have stolen out our people, those who are eating crumbs from the table, they're gonna always be the ones that afforded the platforms and the microphones. And we saw Benjamin Crump and we saw Al Sharpton and we saw the get along crew. Like we saw all of them over the last few days. And all of them are working with the system to tell us, you got it. We got justice. I mean, and then they even there's a video I saw. There's a video of President Joe Biden, and he's got Benjamin Crump and a few more of the family members standing around. He's talking on the phone, and all of this is being broadcast live to the people all around the United States because we know what they're trying to do. They're trying to quell the righteous indignation, the righteous anger, the righteous rage that we have, and they're trying to subdue us and tell us that everything's handled. Like this is it. Like they want us to think that it was all about that isolated situation and not about the totality of circumstances that have been going on and that continue to go on surrounding us and threaten our existence as on the planet Earth. So I just wanted to share that. Whoever wants to be next, go ahead and close us out. Someone closes us out.
Hey, this is Mandy. Yeah, I just agree with everybody. The same that justice wasn't served with the verdict. The only way justice can be served is if no other Black people lose their lives because of from being murdered by the police. And when this racist system has been demolished and ended, I mean, that's the only justice that'll be served, because like everyone's said, pretty much all they are slave catchers and slave patrol. And it's just sad, like Lulu was saying earlier, that even people that are Black are saying that well, they were criminals, they were they deserved what they got. But that's all because people are being criminalized and people are called criminals. People are labeled as these things. So that we don't see them as people. We don't see them as people that have rights. So if you're calling someone a criminal, so they had a right, it was okay for them to be killed. So you've never broken the law. You've never driven with expired tags, or, I mean, people get in fights all the time with knives, like someone was saying at bars. So you're not trained to go handle that in a way without killing a 16-year-old girl. I mean, that's just ridiculous, but people justify it all the time. And it's very sad. But if people would go back and study history and see what happened and what is still going on, they would realize that this is just the way of the media, the government, the politicians, of brainwashing all of us and, making it okay to still catch slaves and put them in prisons. I mean, that's all they're doing. And that's all that's been happening since slavery was supposedly abolished. And, people really think that slavery was abolished. And if they would just look at history, they would see that what's going on right now is just new types of Black codes. How can people can't drive, they don't have enough money to pay to fix their headlight or their brake light, but then they get stopped by the cops and given tickets. So then they have fines to pay, all these things that are just against them. And then they end up getting put in jail because they can't pay these fines. you know, and if you have money, you get out of jail. If you don't have money, you're stuck in jail. I mean, even simple things, they get stuck in jail and they can't even go to trial. They can't get out on bail because they don't have any money. So it's just a vicious system, and it's doing what it's supposed to do. So we just need to dismantle the whole system, and then we'll have justice. That's all I have.
Very well said. Thank you very much. We appreciate everyone for coming on, joining National Freedom Movement, listening to our panel, great panel of people from, I think we probably heard from about 6 or 7 states. I know we heard from Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, Ohio, New York, and I don't know if I'm forgetting someone. Just the North Carolina, just the layer of the perspectives and the different points that were made. I was really feeling what our last speaker, Mandy, was saying. Like, I mean, because when she started describing the fines and stuff, like this is what convict leasing was built on. They used the vagrancy laws to pull up on people and say, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing out here? You don't have paperwork or you don't have permission. And there it is, you're charged. And then the court will impose a fine that our people couldn't pay. And that's then justifies them selling that labor off, convict leasing. That's exactly how it happened. Like, this is not, bail reform is not something new. Bail reform has always been used as a way to keep people in prison. And guess what? Miraculously, these people can be put to work in the kitchen, on the road squads, on the farms, and all these other different places while they're being incarcerated, but can't make bail. Like, you can't make bail, but you can go to work for free, and that labor cannot be used to pay your bail to get you out or to reduce the cost or anything. So like, we've just got to understand this system. And that's why I think that this conversation today is so important. And so I appreciate everyone for joining. Go ahead and close us out, Savannah. And then we're going to come off live, and then we're going to just close out our meeting with a little follow-up. So we thank you all for joining, and thanks everyone for participating.
Hey guys, so I just wanted to close with, like, we have organizers, like really strong, great organizers on this call from all across the country. And it's really important to point out that, like, you know, in organizing, it's a two-part entity, right? So you can protest or demonstrate, and then there's a legislative component of that. And in talking about George Floyd, there are a lot of states who've passed legislation, whether it's, you know, dealing with qualified immunity, the 48-hour rule, or the no banning chokeholds. But, you know, when you look at the international response to George Floyd, there are protests everywhere. When you look at the courtroom, not even half of those people responded to these pieces of legislation. So going to the hearings, you know, standing up for these pieces of legislation to let their legislators know that they support it. Even in Texas, like, we had a great response, but there's millions of people here in Texas. You know, I think there was a little bit over 100 people who testified on House Bill 88. But I just said that to say that, like, you know, whether we're talking about slavery, you know, constitutional law, we're talking about procedural law dealing with the police, like, we have to really get more involved in understanding the law and doing what we can to support these pieces of legislation, because people are pushing the pin in the middle of the night on us, whether we know it or not. You know, voter suppression, all those things, they're pushing the pin in the middle of the night. And before we know it, these laws have already been passed. So we can't be reactive on things like this. We have to be more proactive. And that's all I wanted to say in closing.
All righty. Appreciate it. National Freedom and Justice Movement. You can't reform a rotten apple, no fixed system that was never meant. Okay, Muwat, you can take us off live. Or whoever has us on live, whoever has us on live, go ahead and take us off.